Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Friday night feature here on Wrestling Royalty and on Gimme a Hell Yeah. And we're going to do things a little bit differently tonight. As you'll have seen, we are going to be talking about the Netflix series, the Mr. McMahon Netflix series that dropped on Wednesday and is the talk of all of wrestling and social media at the moment. And the way we're going to do things a little bit differently, I'm going to lay him up straight away and bring Sam in. We had a bit of a chat about how we wanted to do this. I binge watched every episode pretty much from, I think it was about lunchtime all the way through. I managed to watch it all in the same night. Sam did something similar last night, I believe. But I'm going to bring Sam in. And Sam is going to kind of lead proceedings today, and he's going to be the one who asks the questions. So I'm going to be a guest on my own Friday night feature. But we're going to bring him in now. Yeah, hello. How's it going, Sam?
I'm all right. Yeah. So for people who don't know, or people who watch this regularly when we do this, so Andy will often be the calm, medium, meditative moderator here, and will pose questions to me, and I'll fly off the handle. And a lot of this is let's poke Sam with a stick and let's see what makes him erupt. It was somebody, I won't say who. Somebody compared it to Andy's Brian Last poking Jim Cornette, which I don't know how I feel about that, Andy. But
well, as long as I'm not Jim Cornette, it's fine.
No, you're Brian, and I'm Jim in this one. Apparently, I'm the one who, because if you ever watch Jim's and Brian's podcast, Brian will often be the calm one, and obviously Cornette is Cornette. will and has no filter. But yeah, so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to kind of switch that around, because I think Andy's got stronger feelings. I know, because I've been speaking to him all week. I think Andy's got stronger feelings for once than me tonight. So I'm going to poke me. Yeah, I'm a poke Andy. So guys, if you ever wanted to watch me poke Andy on YouTube, here's your opportunity. So that's what we're going to do. So Andy, I'm going to start by saying welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me. And first of all, talk me through your experience watching that, your initial thoughts, and the journey it took you on, and we'll probe into that based on what you say.
So, have you got a microphone on backwards? I keep hearing some like popping or something. I don't know what's going on.
Oh,
I don't think it's mine.
Hang on a minute. What about now?
You've gone very quiet.
What about now?
Still quiet.
Oh, tell you what, I've got an idea.
I'm sorry, go on. Oh, it's saying your mic is not connected. While Sam deals with his audio issues, I'll start by saying the biggest thing really was that when they announced Mr. McMahon as a series and they were going to kind of delve into it, my expectations were possibly more akin to, everyone has these thoughts about a Netflix series, and especially when it comes to sort of documentaries, true crime, etc. And they're very well produced, they're very polished, and they kind of tell a story from beginning to end. And I was quite excited. And this was announced a long time ago in the grander scheme of things. And a lot has happened since they announced it to its release date. And with the other documentaries that you get on Netflix, a lot of the time, obviously, it's a majority of the time, it's a closed case. They've got all the facts, they've got all the things that they can do to piece together this sort of story. And then they can kind of go into it with, as a traditional linear storyline of start, middle, end. Whereas here, a lot of things where it's really kind of changed the narrative of what this should have been about happened towards the back end of when they were filming it, and it just takes some time to edit and produce, etc., to get it out there. But I wrote a piece for WrestleSphere that you can go read if reading is more your thing and you want to kind of get a little bit more of a flavor about it from there. And that's a bit more of an artistic kind of point of view that I'll put across here. Might not be so succinct as we do a sort of Facebook from early days where Sam is going to poke me and prod me and whatever to try and get some more information. My initial thoughts, just to very quickly go into it, I was deeply disappointed to be honest. That's how I'll start things off. My opening gambit was I was disappointed by the content, by the tone of it, pretty much everything. There are bits that I will go into where there are positives to it, but overall, I think it was a halfway house, really. You are not there at all, Sam.
What? Can you hear me now? Right. Flipping heck. I think I need new headphones. What specifically disappointed you?
So, talk about specifics. I kind of expected there to be a little bit more of a probing. When you have Netflix coming in to do this, I think you look at it from the perspective of, or my perspective was, they are a third party. They are not intrinsically involved. They should have been impartial to the fact of, we will present you with our narrative from our interviews that we've done. I thought there was so many times where they were speaking to Vince McMahon, and let's face it, there's not many people who have had an opportunity to speak to Vince McMahon for the amount of time that Netflix managed to speak to him. Yep. So what they could have done, and in my opinion should have done, as a reputable streaming platform and just platform in general, is they should have pushed at certain points where it made the documentary feel a little bit more legit. Because what I will say is, if anyone wanted to skip this, or if anyone was in the past, you could have watched, I think it was a 2008 documentary that WWE themselves released that had about 90% of what was in this. As a wrestling fan, and I know people don't like the term, I count myself as a wrestling journalist or part of the wrestling media.
Yep.
I learnt precious little, because there were bits in there that were like very sort of like one-liner anecdotes where I'd be like, okay, cool, that was something I didn't know. But why did I hear about the Montreal Screwjob again? Why did I need to hear about Stone Cold, Hogan, Rock, John Cena as their debuts? Why? Because Vince McMahon creates characters, but you effectively bulked out the majority of 6 hours worth of content by telling us about things that is readily available that you could have found on the WWE network. So from a wrestling fan perspective, nothing there. Then you go, okay, take that cap off and think, what, as a neutral or someone who isn't that interested in wrestling, are they going to even click on this? Because let's face it, like, if you don't know Vince McMahon, you don't know Mr. McMahon, it's not a catchy title like How to Catch a Killer or anything like that, or how to, like, there's not a lot of substance there to make you want to click on it. The trailer would instantly show you this is about wrestling. To me, that would turn a lot of neutrals off, because I don't think you really would care, if you're a neutral fan or not a fan of wrestling, to commit 6 hours unless it is very well thought of in terms of, can you log on to Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it and see, oh, this is amazing, this is much, you have to go watch this. I don't think anyone is going to say that after watching it. So I just don't understand who the audience is supposed to be, because it's not for wrestling fans. I don't think it's for non-wrestling fans. There's nothing in the middle. It's not a Venn diagram at that point. There's one or the other. And then Netflix, let's ask the other question. Netflix have got a multi-billion-pound deal with WWE that starts in January. I don't understand the timing behind this. They offer nothing new. WWE has done nothing but try and separate themselves from Vince McMahon and clean up its image in terms of, no, he was involved, he was the owner, he was blah, blah, blah. This is us. We are a company. Netflix releasing this now before any verdict or any investigation has been completed into Vince McMahon does nothing but muddy waters and trudge things up that WWE have long tried to fight and push away. It's awful timing. There's so many things wrong with this and let's face it, they didn't even nail the guy. There was a couple of bits where you go, that's a bit shady, but let's face it, we knew he wasn't a nice guy already. I just don't understand. I really don't get it.
So while we were watching it last night, Jess and I, she says to me about halfway through episode 3, Sam, I'm going to put my iPad on and just watch my stuff, because I've seen all this before.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is my wife. So you and me, so obviously, again, we work in wrestling media. We do gobble up all these things on the network. In fact, we've said a lot of nice things about WWE's documentaries in the past, as many of them have been fascinating. Now, a lot of them have kind of massaged the truth and made the company look good at times when they should have been a little bit more fierce. And I think, so for her to say that it's almost out of the mouths of babes. It's like, that says it all to me. The fact that like Jess, who's not even a massive wrestling fan, she knew about the screw job. She knew about all this stuff. She didn't need to sit through this again. I think we were all waiting for something new from this, and it didn't give us that. And I find myself quite just flat after watching it. The only things I've taken away from that is I'm a little bit disappointed in Stone Cold Steve Austin, which I'm sure everybody is, because, I mean, science is science, mate. Sorry. And
for anyone who's, I don't know, the thing is, I don't want to go into specifics because people might watch it more this weekend. But what I will say is there is a moment, and you'll see it on social media, Stone Cold on this, they're talking about concussions. And it's actually one of the things that someone praises Vince for and says, actually, he was past wrestler. He went into sports psychology and medicine, very heavily into CTE. Is it CTE? Is it called?
Yeah.
Which is about concussion protocol in the NFL, NBA, etc., wrestling. And he said that WWE and Vince McMahon were one of the only ones who actually took me up on it. Originally, it was because Vince didn't want to be buried and associated with it. He called him up and said, you know what? Come in, talk to the guys. And that was where a lot of them started going, we're not doing pile drivers anymore. We're not going to be using steel chairs anymore. Legitimately, Vince safeguarded both the image and the wrestlers at the same time. One of the things he should be praised for was actually, don't be so stuck in your ways that you'll ignore it. Stone Cold to turn around and say, I don't believe in CTE, like it's a methodology or a belief system. It's not.
Yeah, like it's a religion.
Science. Very frustrating.
I don't believe in cancer, Andy. Do you know what? My wife claimed to have a headache the other night, Andy. I don't believe in headaches. It's suspicious when she gets headaches. But anyway, But the other thing I learned was and you'll know this as well. You know, you know me a while. You know I roll my eyes at Shane McMahon a bit. I've got no problem with him. I just don't really want to see him on TV anymore. I don't need him. The whole AEW thing has been like, oh. But like the last Mania I was at, he came out and blew both his quads in a similar fashion to his dad. So he really is following his dad's footsteps. But I actually have renewed appreciation and sympathy for. And there was a lot of parallel. There's a lot that Shane McMahon said on that documentary that resonates with me on a personal level too, which we won't go into. But I get it, Shane. I get it. So yeah, that's all I took away from that. Was I'd seen that documentary before, and I think what I will say in its defence, because I don't have much in the way of strong things to say about it, but what I will say in its defence is I think when they originally went to do this, it was supposed to be a bit of a puff piece on Vince and the story of WWE from start to present. Ready for them coming to Netflix. I think that was the original purpose of it. And in many ways, that is exactly what it was. And it got interrupted by everything with the allegations and all of that. So then they needed to make a decision. And that decision was, do we turn this into an expose, or do we stick with the original product that we made and tack on the final episode and make it about that? So that is what I would say in its defence. But there's only one word that sticks out for this, and it's unnecessary. The whole thing was unnecessary, and I think it was designed for wrestling fans. Like, the only people who are going to watch this, as you said earlier, are wrestling fans. But the wrestling fans have already seen all this before, which brings up the question once again, and exactly what you said in the WrestleSphere feature: who was this for? Because I get who it was meant to be for, but in the end, it was just for nobody. And here's the thing. Here's the one more thing I'll say about it. Fast forward 6 months, no one will remember it. No one will be talking about it. No one will care. This thing is going to come and go. This podcast is going to live longer than that.
it was like, I think a lot of the points what you said there is true. And like the thing where we were talking about was, it may have started life as a puff piece and basically like one big promo for Vince, because I think at the time, like, Vince was still linked and on the board and things like that. And when Netflix was kind of sniffing around and talking and then signed off and stuff, and it was like, a cool, we'll get this piece about this larger than life character who blurs the line between, like, character and real person. And like, I get that. That's not a bad storyline to tell. But even the way they did it, within the first 90 odd seconds of this, Vince McMahon says, deadpans to the camera, I wish I could tell you the real stories. There's some proper SHIT in there. And the interviewer says, tell us one there. And he goes, no, I don't want anyone knowing the real me. And then laughs and smiles. At that point, the red flags are waving. The bells are going off, going like, wait a second. You have a job as a journalist to sit in front of this man who has escaped being pushed in an interview since probably the late 90s, when he used to flip off people in interviews and stuff like that you saw. And you've squandered it because you don't want to upset the apple cart. Now, to me, I just look at it from either, we both have journalism degrees. I think he had, and people say this about people in the media, when they do the press junkets after the pay-per-views and the premium live events, etc., that the journalists don't push them enough. This person had no skin in the game. They should have, like, I'm not talking about give us a got your moment that these kind of things do. But at the end of the day, when you go into Vince McMahon's childhood and you ask him about, what was it like growing up, and your stepfather was abusive, and and then there's a throwaway line that they just dangle there that there's allegations that in an interview he did with Playboy that his mother or family member or female family member sexually assaulted him as a child. That explains and is foreshadowing for a lot of what has happened recently. And, I'm not saying it explains why he did it. I'm not saying that's a reason why he did it and excuses anything. But if you're born and raised in that kind of environment, why would you not pull that thread a little bit more and say, right, can we talk to a childhood friend? Can we talk to another family member? Can we get some background on who Vince McMahon was before he met his father, while he met his father and was growing up in his formative years, to then understand more about the person at the end of it? They did nothing of that. They gave us nothing new. They let Vince McMahon dictate, as he always does, how his perception is on screen, to the point where he released a statement the day before asking people to keep an open mind. There was leaked stories in Wrestling Observer that Vince had tried to buy the Netflix documentary from them so it couldn't be screened. Generally, I don't think he did any of those things, and it was all a big PR stunt to make you kind of be like, oh, there must be something juicy in there that he doesn't want people to see. Because I'm telling you now, spoiler alert, there's genuinely nothing new here. You could find every single thing that is discussed on another documentary or in the newspapers and online. There's nothing new at all. Nothing.
What was Bruce Pritchard actually mad about? I still don't know. Like when he's like, oh, it's a hatchet piece. It was a got you piece. In what specifically, Bruce? How? Like it's okay to be mad. It's okay to have your opinion, but like any opinion, I do think you should back it up with. It's like you say with the journalists. Going back on that as well, as a journalist, and I know me and Andy, we work in entertainment and wrestling and gaming and films and TV. Basically, we're entertainment journalists. Do you know why? Because that's what we enjoy doing, and we pay our mortgages with it. But it's like, but as a journalist, when you're looking at other journalists interviewing somebody, you sometimes want to scream because of when they tickle their belly. It happens in politics a lot. Like a politician will say something absolutely outrageous, and everybody watching is thinking, ask them about that, right? Drill down into fact check them on that. And they don't. They tickle their belly and off they go. And there was more of that. And look, as a guy, it's when the spotlight is on you and you're the one doing the questioning, yeah, you do sometimes not not think in the moment. You don't get that question out when you should have. Or in my own case, very recently, you say the wrong word. But like we are, until journalism is done by robot, like it's done by human beings. So it's imperfect because we're imperfect. So
but even then, like you could get a robot to do an interview. Your whole point as an interviewer is to have some questions ready to go, and then you respond to what the person is saying in the moment, because you know, if as a journalist, your job is to get to the story and to drill into a story. Now, as soon as Vince says something of interest, don't move on to the next that question. And then this is the thing, we don't know how much footage they've got. They said there was over 100 hours of video interviews that they conducted, and obviously the editing process, they can't keep everything in. But my God, if this is what they kept in, there can't be much like juiciness that they kept out, because I think the problem is if they've signed certain things to say Vince gets final say on what goes on, it shouldn't have been made. It should have stopped and went, we can't do that documentary because what's the point? As you said, it's just why? There's nothing to it.
I'm sticking with me being the moderator thing after my faux pas with the microphones. Where does it go from here? What's the legacy of this? Like, they asked, the final question was, what's Vince's legacy? And only one of them actually answered that properly. But if I'm asking you, and there he is. Where does this documentary go from here? Is there any blowback from this? Is there any impact at all from this?
No. Simply, the answer is no, because as you said earlier on, I genuinely think that this will just be hot this weekend, maybe through for a little bit longer, and then it will just disappear in terms of into the back annals of Netflix. It'd be interesting to see what they do when all the content from the network moves on to Netflix, because that maybe they'll move that Vince McMahon 2008 or whatever it was documentary on, and then basically people go, oh, okay, so this has been around for years. But there's a lot of comments that I'll kind of like I'll address, because part of it plays into this as well. Nemeth 45 said, I had a feeling Netflix wouldn't have buried him completely. Normar said maybe Netflix had to be careful what they said in the doc, since Janelle Grant's lawsuit's still going on. 100%. That is my point, though. Why now? Why in September, when everyone knows that there is that in July, the judge put 6 months hold on this case until the federal investigation had been completed? That is one of the biggest investigations, or highest investigations, someone can be in the US. Netflix decides 3 or 4 months before the judge can even look into it again, decides now's the right time to release something. Why didn't they just wait and then say, why don't you just go, right, we're going to pull this back because there's a lot of stuff that's happened. How many times have we seen series been delayed? Stranger Things was supposed to be out this year, yet they couldn't hold this for a legitimate reason and go, well, actually, this would be so much more of a big story because of everything that's happened. We want to wait and we want to make sure we're not stepping on any legal toes and things like that. But they didn't. Like, at the end of the day, like, they could have just waited. Vince didn't even do the interviews from the moment it was announced. They had years for this.
Sorry, Andrew. I got distracted by the banter in the comments. Mark, I think he was doing the gif of, oh, hi, Mark.
Yeah.
Which was responsible when you were talking, but very good, Nemeth 45. Very good.
There's a few other comments that we'll go through as well. How do you say this? Papito Flow 6969. The McMahon documentary is number 2 right now on Netflix. Most watches hitting number 1. So I expect over the weekend it might do, because it was one of the biggest ones they released. Maybe the rom-com featuring Seth from the OC might get there, but we'll see. What else have we got? Beyond the Play. As a casual fan who followed the news a little closer than most, nothing new for sure. Also said, as flawed as Vince is, he was never afraid to do what was best for the bottom dollar, which a lot of people do say throughout as well.
His hypocrisy rang out, didn't it? His hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Like the whole, I'm cutthroat. This is business, man. This is America. This is capitalism. Anyone ever did a business decision that wasn't personal, that was the right thing for them and the right thing for their family. Betrayal, absolute betrayal. The morality of it, of Vince, like. And the worst thing to like, we're all guilty of being hypocrites at some point. We all are. But in a situation like that, it's the worst thing you can be, particularly when you acknowledge your hypocrisy and then keep doing it. Like what is that? Like the cognitive dissonance. Oh mate, I'm doing my role and not your role. No,
I mean, like Mark said it here, our trusty moderator. It says they reminded him of stuff while they were talking to Vince McMahon, and they would say, "Oh, like this was said by this journalist," or "You did this," and they said, "Like, oh, tell us about the story." Basically, tell us about the storyline where you said you wanted to impregnate Stephanie, and he went, "Oh, did I say that? Did I?" And he was like, "Yes, Vince," because one, who else would be crazy enough to have even said that in the first place? But two, if you've forgotten that, my God, like what things have you still got in your memory? It didn't make sense. Like there was so many times where like I was just screaming like to the journalists, was like, ask him more questions, go into him.
God, I was gonna say I wouldn't want to be in a room with him, but like if that had been me or you, oh my God, the things I would have sneezed deliberately. I would have been like, "Oh mate, sorry, I got a cold. What can I say?"
So here's the thing with Vince McMahon, right? And this is kind of feeds into like the legacy side of things. And I know I said it in the kind of description for the video. It's like what's Vince's legacy now? And they asked that as the question. And this guy is one of the guys who comes out of it with a lot of credit, is Tony Atlas, who I thought played everything 50-50 in terms of he was very fair. He would kind of criticize, but he'd also praise. And when they asked him that, he just said, a visionary. He is the guy who changed wrestling forever. That's absolutely true. All the stuff that he's been accused of, and it turns my stomach, it makes my skin crawl. But and that day will come where he will have to face like court and investigations and stuff like that. But for me, as a wrestling fan, as a wrestling journalist, there is no other interview I would want more than to sit in a room with Vince McMahon and be able to ask him questions. Now, would he like every question? Would he answer every question? Probably not. But for just that opportunity was squandered here over 6 hours, and they didn't. And I'll talk about the positives. I say Tony Atlas, huge positive. I thought he came out of it incredibly well. Shane McMahon, as you said, like I thought he came out of it extremely well and very sympathetic. He was the sympathetic son that just craved his daddy's attention, and there was jokes about it when he had like feuds, and it was like, "Oh, Dad, do you love me now?" And I'll throw myself out of a helicopter and like barely survive, and I'll throw myself off of the Hell in a Cell just to get your attention and your respect. And the moment where, and I think most guys can probably like, and anyone who's got any kind of like father or daddy issues or anything like that, because as the saying goes, all the best cowboys have father issues. Shane McMahon getting that hug after that match with The Undertaker where he went off the Hell in a Cell, and you can read Vince's lips and he says, "I love you, son," and you can see Shane visibly melt into the hug and just sit and get what he's been waiting for. But the fact that Vince McMahon didn't know his father, didn't have a great relationship with him, always craved his respect and his adoration. The fact that he continued that cycle after saying he knows that you either break the cycle, you continue it, and chose to continue it, just says everything you need to know about Vince McMahon as a man, as a father. Like, to me, where there was more heart behind it, where Vince spoke about Vince Sr., or where he spoke about his kids or the future or how people view him, was much more riveting than anything else they could have put on. And that's what they should have focused in on. It should have been a very focused spotlight into Vince McMahon, not into WWE, because that's what they ended up doing, was telling a sort of wider scope of WWE and some of the scandals that they'd been embroiled in with steroids or Hogan leaving. Like, how many times do we have to hear about the damn Monday Night Wars? If I wanted to know about it, I would go watch it. Like, we've seen it. It's been done to death. And I get Netflix might not have done it, but it adds nothing of value. This story where Vince went off at Shane, grabbed a knife, pushed it into his hand and then signaled, "You're going to have to kill me if you want to get this company, like I would have killed my own dad." That is a story where people will go, "All right, cool. Now we're getting somewhere."
Yeah,
You have to wait till the last 30 minutes of the last episode to get that story.
Yeah, and like don't get me wrong, I've actually heard that story before. I couldn't tell you where. I've been a wrestling fan for a very long time, but I have heard that before. This reminded me of it. It wasn't one of those things I had in the forefront of my brain when I think of their relationship. It's like the whole "I'm going to impregnate Steph" thing. Like I've heard that before. I don't know where, but like it's
Stephanie said it.
Yeah, but I would have heard it on a podcast somewhere, and I've heard the story about the knife somewhere on a podcast. It might have been on Cornet's. I could be wrong. But it's like that. Yeah, that's the stuff. That's the stuff. One question I do have, which is interesting, is could this have any value? This documentary. Like it's not an expose on Vince, so let's just bury that now. But it's not that; it never will be that, and I actually don't think it was ever going to be that. It's like I say, I think it was going to be a puff piece through the eyes of Vince McMahon, him completely controlling the situation as he always does. That it was the story of WWE, and do you think though, as Netflix, it goes to Netflix, as people like you and I, as new fans go to Netflix and learn about the company and want to know more, do you think it could have value as the definitive story of WWE from start to finish? Because one thing I will say about it is it combined a lot of those older documentaries that we've watched. This kind of combined them all into one abridged piece, and I kind of liked that aspect of it. I just wish it wasn't about Vince and more about WWE in that sense.
It's a good question, and I have actually thought about that previously. But the answer is still no. I kind of feel like it stops short of that because I feel with WWE's production and Netflix together, they can at some point put that definitive documentary from start to finish. And yes, Vince features heavily because it's his company and he always will do. But I just don't see there's certain things that they included, like where it's like, all right, cool, yeah, we heard about how Vince spoke to The Rock or how Stone Cold became a star. I get there's certain people like Hogan. I can see in the comments people have said they cringe every time Hogan was on, bored of hearing about Hogan.
Yeah.
Again, a very polarizing figure for very legitimate reasons. Hulk Hogan, without Hulk Hogan, there isn't a WWE. Not as it is today anyway. But why? Here's another question for you, and I'll ask the comments as well. Why was Dave Meltzer so heavily featured? Because once again, we spend a lot of time going, he is one guy and he has his opinion, and he often just buries WWE. So they got Dave Meltzer on. I'm imagining he got a decent payday from it because he was on a fair amount of time. But again, even he didn't bury Vince and the opportunity for him to do so. So it just tells you that this was so balanced in terms of like, oh, if we say something and kind of edit something to make it sound like Vince was lying, let's get something on that makes him sound good straight away. And it was kind of like so in the middle. So in terms of the documentary, I don't know. I just feel like there's voices that are missing from it to make it a real like definitive. This is WWE from start to finish. I just felt like it was more of a case of we'll get some like pretty big names. We'll ask a couple of wrestling journos who are highly thought of, or who've had a couple of books out or something, and put it all together. Whereas what they should have done is, right, why don't you go speak to some of the guys who got effed over when the territories were taken over by Vince? Like, why don't you speak to some of those guys, some of the ones who didn't want to wrestle for Vince? Why don't you speak to any dissenting voice that was in WCW? Why don't you speak to the guy who, the journalist, I can't remember his name, who goes in on Vince at every opportunity he's got?
Muchnick.
And was the reason why the FBI continually like kind of tracked him. Like he had his convictions to say, I don't like this guy. He's a sleazy guy. I don't really like professional wrestling. This was my reason why I didn't like it. And they had this opportunity. I didn't like it for this reason. And he stayed true to his opinions. But then you had Stephanie on there who would kind of like talk about her dad. When we then learned in episode 6 and we all knew as wrestling fans, she left the company the day of Vince going back in. So there's definitely some dissension there. So it was kind of like there was that. But then we then hear from Bret Hart loads. And then Bret Hart was like, I really didn't like this guy. Like, he screwed me over. But yeah, he also always did what was right for business. And he's not that bad. I buried the hatchet. I came back out and we had matches and whatever. So it's kind of like a very confusing storyline. And I just think there was too many people guarded and too many people maybe fed lines and overly edited. So it sounds so negative. And it's just because I'm just severely underwhelmed and disappointed by it.
I think where we're going to learn the most about Vince McMahon and get a definitive, and I think he's two things, and we'll get into that in a minute in terms of separating a man from his art. But I think we're gonna learn the truth about Vince McMahon, I suspect, with this case that's been brought against him. And
you reckon?
Well, not everything, but I think we might, depending on how that ends up. There's a possibility that that's the answer we need. And I think I know what it is. I think he's a lot of what he's been accused of. Again, we can't prove it or anything like that. It goes beyond the no smoke without fire thing. Like a lot of those text messages that I read when that came out, it's really hard to come back from some of that stuff. And I do think that's who he is. I do think this was a guy who controlled the kingdom, and every whim was satisfied, like a god king, and he got to the point where he genuinely felt indestructible. And we had a long conversation about power corrupting. We got very philosophical on our WhatsApp group today, and Batman even made an appearance too. But best chat ever if Batman's involved. But see, when I look at Vince now, I have a real issue internally, and I have it with a few people in the wrestling business. So with Vince McMahon, here's what I can't deny. That a massive part of the happiness in my life that I derive from wrestling and the entertainment, and I am a lifelong wrestling fan, by the way. I'm very passionate about it. I probably watch a bit of it every day if I can. I think about it every day. I talk to my wife about it. It's a massive part of my life, and it always has been. And so much so I steered my career around it. So Vince McMahon is a massive part of that. Massive part of that. And I can't take that away from him, and I have no need to either, really. But at the same time, he's probably a bit of a wrong, and but it doesn't mean he doesn't get the credit for all the things that entertained me. But I am, as a wrestling fan, not a journalist, but as a wrestling fan, I'm very, very ready to close the book on Vince McMahon, not think about him ever again. I don't feel like I need him anymore. I feel like the business is better off without him. I think it's transcended him. I'm hoping Stephanie and Triple H don't get caught in his web as he is. Whatever's left of him sinks, if it does. But I give him the flowers, but bye-bye. I'm not even going to give him a handshake and say, I wish you luck in your future endeavours. It's sad, but it's just cut.
Yeah.
Strings.
And I think that's all it is. And like as wrestling fans, and the people in the chat will be wrestling fans because you wouldn't be following a wrestling channel, or the vast majority of people who watch this won't be. Even if you're an AEW fan, even if you're a New Japan Pro Wrestling fan, if you love everything, nothing, whatever, you would not, and I can guarantee this, no matter how much you disagree with me, you would not be a wrestling fan if it was not for WWE, which means you would not be a wrestling fan if it was not for Vince McMahon, because if Vince McMahon hadn't come in, there's no guarantee that wrestling would have continued in the same way it was. It would have been stuck in America, in the territories, and apparently it was an old boys club. Would they have ever moved through to like cable networking or networking TV? Who knows? Maybe one day. Maybe someone else would have come along.
I think so.
But we'll never know. But because it was Vince who did it first, and Vince made these characters, and at the end of the day, Vince created a world where all of us have escaped to at some point. Where maybe we've had a bad day and we've turned on wrestling and it's cheered us up a little bit. Maybe he's created a character that you've looked forward to for weeks to see them in a premium live event or pay-per-view, whatever you want to kind of call it. Vince created that character, or Vince created a character that's led to another character that's been influenced by another character. The tendrils and the tentacles of Vince McMahon will be felt for decades because of his influence in the industry. I couldn't tell you of another industry where one man has so ultimately
terrifying.
Yeah,
it's,
but
it's
I couldn't do it.
It's
music. Music is shared by so many people. Films are shared by so many people. And don't get wrong, there's awful people in both those industries. Television is the same. But you couldn't tell me an industry where one person has such an influence over every single point of where we are today because of him. And if it wasn't for that person, they wouldn't be presented that way. Camera angles wouldn't be the same way. The instant replays wouldn't be the same way. Entrances wouldn't be the same way. You know what I mean? And this is where we're kind of stuck, because then you have to then go, it's not possible to unravel Vince's influence over something that we love so much. But then you are caught up in the morality of some of the really shitty things that he's done over his life and has continued to do. And I don't know, for now, I just want him to disappear, as you said, enjoy his retirement away from the limelight. Don't do anything else. Like,
I don't even care if he enjoys it. I don't care if he enjoys it.
Well, yeah, true. Just go live your life separately to this industry that you've made us all fall in love with. Just move on. Like, this is it now. Leave it to the next generation. You did so well for decades and decades, but now is the time. Just leave it alone. I don't want to hear your name anymore. Like, it'll come up occasionally and you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember, but I don't know if time heals all here. I don't think it does. I think his reputation, his legacy is tainted forever. He flew too close to the sun when he tried to make his character live out his ultimate fantasies in a really seedy way. Thanks for the memories. Thanks for the world you created. Bye.
But I'm not even saying thanks, because I feel I'm
not say thank you.
I'm not going to say thank you to him, because I would have done. I would have stood up, applauded, clapped, and said thank you so much. But I can't do it to him. It's not just the accusations. It like, after reading those texts, and seeing some of the thing, he is a wrong one. No matter, there's no I'm giving him his flowers for what he achieved, but I'm not thanking him. This is a guy who I don't even want to have his name on my lips anymore, and I actually feel a little bit soiled by his involvement. He hasn't ruined wrestling for me at all, but I'm not giving this guy anything. It's not. It's like I said. It's not a handshake and a thank you. It's just a cutting the string. It's just gone. Harvey Weinstein's made a lot of movies I like. Again, string cut. Bye. It's that. I don't want to go into the specifics, but I used to be a big Lost Prophets fan. And I've got friends who say to me they still like that music, and that's fine. I'm not judging you, but I can't
listen to it.
I can't hear that guy's voice. I'm not having that guy's voice come out of mine, and I'm not going to do that per se. Like, the difference is that guy got found guilty and sent to prison, where I hope he rots. And if the same thing happens to Vince, bye. But right now, they're just allegations, but the evidence is overwhelming. And even if he kind of gets off without crimes and stuff like that, I'm still disgusted. I still don't want him near me. I love WWE. I support WWE. I want the best for WWE. I don't want I don't wish any harm on Vince McMahon, but I don't wish anything good on him either. I just want him gone.
No, the other way to look at it is, for me, this is about, if it's found to be true, the allegations by Janelle Grant towards him, and if that stuff is true, she's the priority to make sure that things are made right as much as they can be for her as a person, because no one should have to be subjected to stuff that she was subjected to. Again, if and when it is found to be that happened. We are going to wrap up here, and I'm going to end with a question for the chat, and then we're going to bounce off before we answer any of them, because it's a bit. And I will say, one person who does reserve a lot of respect, because I have seen it in the chat. Rest in peace, Dame Maggie Smith. Absolutely, of the silver screen and the TV screen as well. Very sad to hear that news as well. So I will say that's some incredibly sad news today that came out. I'm going to end with this question, and I just want to say thank you for Sam for poking and prodding this on this one. We'll have to do it again. I quite enjoyed it. Putting my someone put 50 pence in me and made me rant today. But yeah,
is that how much it costs now with inflation?
The question I've got for you, if you watch this after the fact, or if you watch it now, drop the comment in, and I just wanted to see it as a giggle. If you were to meet Vince McMahon tomorrow in the street and you had an opportunity to say one thing and one thing only, what are you saying? Now, I am going to end it there because I have a feeling that some people might be quite forthright in their opinion of what they would say. But what would you say if you had the one chance to say something to Vince McMahon and nothing else? So I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. As always, we'll be back again next week, probably with a preview, because I believe next week is the Bad Blood pay-per-view. So we'll be going through the card for Bad Blood next week. Obviously, make sure you subscribe to both Give Me a Hole Yeah, where you'll see all the great streams that Ant and Dan do for AEW and Monday Night Raw. You can see some stuff from Dom pops up, and there's also a couple of things coming from Sam in the near future in terms of fantasy booking. So make sure
it's taking a while.
The only way you're going to find out when it drops is you have to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to get that notification when you get these new videos. But thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend. If you're watching wrestling, I hope you enjoy it. You can see from my t-shirt, North Wrestling has got a show up in Newcastle. There's loads of stuff going on in the UK. I'm sure there's loads of stuff going on in the US as well. If you are all caught up in the hurricane over, is it Hurricane Helene in the US? Yeah. Please stay safe. Our thoughts are with you. But yeah, thank you for joining us. He's been Sam. I've been Andy. This has been Wrestling Royalty, and Gimme a Hole Yeah.
Hi, Tom.